Hi, everyone. This is Dr. Angela Byrd-Wright, Division Equity Leader for Hampton Schools. And we are now moving right on into learning session number 2 of phase 2. And that is really centered around operationalizing cultural competence and culturally proficient spaces. So to recall for phase 2, our purpose in this phase is to really clearly and explicitly identify that connection between social emotional learning and equity, as well as defining cultural competence and culturally proficient spaces. So we're going to define that today. And the impact of this phase really is designed for our division level, site-based leaders and our CIA team to now translate and transform our understandings from phase 1, which was that pre-competence phase. And we've talked about that common language and understanding of cultural competence and its leverage points. And as we discussed in our last session together, which was lesson 1 of phase 2, was about using SEL or social emotional learning as a lever for equity. And so this is a continuation of that conversation. And really the understandings in this phase help to drive and inform the basis and a shared understanding and commitment to those intentional, purposeful connections between social emotional learning and equity. So as we move forward, let's talk about our actions today, as well as our driver. As you know, from each of our sessions together, we always have what is it that our participants are going to do as far as our actions and our action steps moving forward, or those next steps, if you will, and then our driver to engage in community building and community building circles and unpacking what it means when we talk about cultural competence and culturally proficient spaces. So as always, I want you to go ahead and stop here on the presentation and click to access the learning session reflection guide. As always, we have those reflection guides for you so that you have the opportunity to take the time to check in with yourself, with your team. You may be watching this video with your team, or maybe with a thinking partner, or by yourself, and that's perfectly fine. But having that opportunity to really sit and to reflect on what's being provided to you. So when you click on that link, it's going to allow you to do a forced copy. And once you get there, you're going to be following along with your reflection guide for each of those sections. So you're going to have the opportunity to process and to connect with what is being shared with you today. All right, and as we have our shared commitment to Brave Space and our goals, which has been really great to see throughout our times together, and that has been really formulating that intentional community of learners. We grow through our interactions. We have a constructive space to share, to disagree, to work together, but that uncomfortable place to be uncomfortable, engaging in those critical or courageous conversations with one another. And then to create that safe space to listen with intentionality, affirmation, being reflective, and of course, is always one thing I love, and that is staying engaged in the process. What you learn here leads with you. Doesn't stay here just in this session and while you're playing this video, but what you learn leaves with you. You take it and apply it to your everyday living, to your work, with your team and in your role. But then what you say here, what you think here will stay here in this safe or brave space. So let's give you just an opportunity to reflect and to connect for a moment about 2 questions. And you'll see that here on your reflection guide, just to draw back from some of our previous learning that we've had with one another. So let's look at our questions for today. First, as we think about social emotional learning, how do equity focus or that transformational social emotional learning, those practices, how does that impact school climate? And if you think about it, as well as your team climate, and contribute to community well-being and thriving. We don't want to survive every day. We want to be able to thrive every day. And then secondly, how, not what, but how. How are you living it? How are you doing everything you can to move your students or the adults from whom you work or with whom you work closer to opportunity? You'll see a timer at the top of your screen. You'll be able to select that while you're in presentation mode. So I'm going to pause right now for you just to take a few minutes. The timer is about 5, but for you to take a few minutes just to check in and reflect on these 2 questions. This will be a great time now to pause the video, and then we'll come back together for our essential question. Welcome back, everyone. I'm glad that you had the opportunity to think on those questions there. You pause the video for just a moment just to really think through those questions with your learning partner or group if you're watching this after the fact of our live session from our CIA team, or just thinking for yourself. And so this is the essential question that we'll have today, and that is, what is your role as an educator in creating those spaces where students and the adults with whom you support can bring their best or their full self? So as you consider the questions that you were asked in that self-paced work and from our previous time together in phase 2 of that first learning session, you'll have that opportunity. What is your role as an educator? When you think about the impact that you make on a daily basis and the people you interact with frequently, how can you and your role create those opportunities that access, supports, outcomes that we go back when you think about the framing of the equity model for our division, that folks can really bring their full selves? And when we say our full selves, that authenticity to the work and to the walk that we're engaged in. So keep that question in mind as we move forward in today's session. So here's the first activity. Now, when we met as a CIA team, we had a deck of some imagery cards, but I want you, if you're watching this by yourself or with the team, I want you to think about the word trust for a moment. What does trust mean to you? So you're going to take a Post-it note or index card, piece of paper, whatever you have next to you. And I want you to draw an image, no words, just an image that really speaks to you about the word trust. Okay, so you're going to do that for a moment. Then you're going to record your own thoughts on your reflection guide. So you got your picture that you're going to draw, and then record your thoughts in your reflection guide. If you're with someone else or with a small group, then use the next couple of minutes to share out how your images represent trust. If you're on your own, again, you're drawing a picture to yourself. What is it that represents trust? There's a timer bottom left of your screen that you can then select in presentation mode, just to give you some time to check in, reflect, and to connect. You'll be writing or putting your reflections here, so your image, and then what are those ahas if you're discussing with someone else? This will be a great time now to pause the video. Then we'll come back together to continue moving forward. Welcome back, everyone. I hope you've had the opportunity to really check in about what does it mean when we talk about trust? And in fact, you may be asking the question, well, why are we even starting with trust to begin with? Because we know that trust is the foundation upon which all relationships are built. And so as we move forward and think about cultural competency, it's about taking that trust, because that's a development. Cultural competency is not something that you just are. It's an ongoing process to really develop into creating a system, a structure, or an environment that does nothing but welcome trust. So having an awareness of your own cultural identity and the views about differences and the ability to learn and build on the varying cultural and community norms, not only of students and their families, but even the adults in which you work with. and having that ability to understand within group differences. As you can see here on the culture wheel to your right of the screen, you're going to see that our culture is embedded in knowledge, stories, languages, traditions, rituals, techniques, the arts, what we value most. And then it impacts the greater community because of the diversity in which we all bring to the table. If you think back, though, to the strategic plan, because it has been articulated in multiple sessions, is that the work of cultural competence, equity, diversity, and inclusive practices is really embedded within the strategic plan. Our strategic plan in Hampton Schools states that in our schools, it also encompasses, and it referring to cultural competency, encompasses an understanding and appreciation of diversity and making the conscious efforts to avoid judgment based on biases, stereotypes, or a lack of accurate information. So within the strategic plan, it's made clear that our work and our walk is having a built-in understanding and an appreciation for the differences that make each of us unique, but add to the tapestry of the school division. And so if relationships are built on trust, then trust is really grounded or undergirded by mirrors, windows, and sliding glass doors. So what do you mean by that? Well, when we think about mirrors, it's an environment that reflects one's culture and helps to build identity. Windows are those opportunities that offer a view into someone else's lived experience. We've talked about that when we've talked back or think back to that commitment to brave space, and understanding that your truth might be different from someone else's, but to affirm and to take the stance of understanding, listening for understanding, okay? And making sure that we not only can see ourselves, and that's our identity, but really others, and that's through empathy and understanding. And it's really through that shared humanity, we can begin to frame and derive deeper meaning and understanding and authenticity through ourselves and the relationships we build. And we do that through that sliding glass door, having that multiple entry and exit points that encourage reflection and action or inspire a change in perspective. So as you think about trust, that's why we started there today, you all, and that is being grounded then by, so if you think about trust, think about a house being built. Trust is that foundation. And then we begin to set up the frames. Those frames are supported by the mirrors, the windows, and the sliding glass doors that really build the house to set on a firm foundation. So now we have the opportunity to reflect and connect about the concept of identity, okay? And so psychologist Dr. John Amaechi, he discusses the connection between concepts of identity and the creation of a safe learning environment and the potential for student achievement. So as you're watching this video, I want you to think out about what really stands out to you between that connection between safe space, nurturing student identity and voice, as well as learning. Okay, so you're going to click this clapper graphic here to get to the video, and then you're going to have an opportunity to reflect on one of the statements that he denotes during this particular video.
Identity is not just self-revelation. It's not just something you come to know about yourself. It's also, in part, made up of how other people see you and how you see yourself in other people. They call this a very old-fashioned a concept in psychology called the looking glass self, the mirror self, the idea that your identity is made up, in part, by how other people see you.
I remember as a youngster, I arrived at that school at age 11, and I remember thinking I knew what I was all about. I was a fat kid. I enjoyed pie and cake. I knew this about myself. I also knew that I enjoyed books. I mean, I devoured books in the same way I devoured cake, actually. I just loved to read. The library was my favorite place. The smell of it alone was like sanctuary. And mostly because the only place you know you're never going to run into other students is in the library. And I remember wishing I could be invisible as I walked through the halls because I was massive and fat and different. And people looked and they pointed and they laughed. And if I walked around the corner too fast and they came towards me, it wasn't laughter, but fear, terror that I would see in their face. And that has an impact on you when you're 11 or 12. I remember being assigned a book to read. And it was the first time I read a book, and in its pages I saw me. I was assigned this book to read over the course of 2 weeks, and I got the book in class just before lunchtime, and by the end of lunchtime I was like a third of the way through. Through the various parts of the day, I managed to steal pages and move forward. And on the bus on the way home, I finished it, and I got in, and I waited around because my mother, single mum, wasn't home when I got home, mostly, ever. And I waited around, and I sat on the landing and waited to hear her keys at the door. And I walked up to her with this book, and I said, Mum, am I a monster? The book was The Hunchback of Notre Dame. And it was the first time, if you've read that book, it has this, the Hunchback is a strange reaction to him from the people around. It's not just fear, it's ridicule and fear, laughter and terror. And that's what I saw every day. People pointing. Even as I walk around now, I was upstairs, and I'm sure it was none of you guys, earlier on today. And a family walked in to go to the lift, and I walked out of the lift to go to the lunch place. And as I walked past, I knew that if I turned around after about 3 steps, I would see it. And I turned around, and there's a mother grabbing her kids. Not the face of, oh, amazing. No, just like, oh. Like a pod had just popped down and an alien had popped out.
A lot of people think we need a safe environment because it's just about this warm and fuzzy experience that young people are supposed to have in education, and it's not really about that. We need a challenging but safe environment because there is a very narrow strata, a very narrow bandwidth where young people can be challenged and high achieve emotionally. And when you're in that sweet spot, amazing things can happen. And when you're outside of it, there's very little chance of high achievement. And what this does, when people are in environments that don't feel safe, that don't feel supportive, they end up coming to school dressing themselves almost in a bodysuit, in a U-suit that is a construction designed to help them blend in and fit, pass. Whatever identity item that we're talking about, it allows them to pass through and at least be invisible, if not outstanding. The problem is that anybody knows who has to dress up in a way that makes them uncomfortable. And a lot of people do this. You know, a lot of teachers and principals will do this too. They have to code switch. They have to come to school with a different set of behaviors. And everybody knows the relief that you feel when you come home at night. And it's almost like you unzip that suit and you can breathe again. You can finally take that big breath and relax. But you also know that you have to be an amazingly high-functioning person to be able to manage your day with that kind of suffocating suit on. And kids don't have that capacity, so they come to school wearing this suit that allows them to fit and pass. And you're asking them to do these really high-level thinking and cognitive tasks in learning, and they can't do it because, A, they have no authentic connection. They're disconnected from the world of the school by this suit that protects them, they hope. And they're also suffocated by it. They're just not going to risk unzipping and being seen for the first time as a person in a space where they think there's any chance, any risk to themselves or their identity or their person. And so it's very true that in the early stages of interventions, that it's a really ideal situation people have to create. Teachers have to create this emotional space where it's safe but challenging, where people can be themselves, where people can take chances and fail, where people can tell stories about them and reveal things about themselves without risk of derision, without fear of being marginalized. Without safety, there is nothing. There is no learning.
So now that you've had the opportunity to view a very powerful video, there's a quote that we just ended with there from Dr. Amechi, and that is, we have to create this emotional space where it's safe but challenging. I love the word that he said there, not classroom. Because as educators, we can think just the classroom. But we need to create spaces. That could be anywhere. That's your workspace. That's your physical space when you're out and about, but a place or a space where it's okay to be safe and challenged, where people can be themselves, where you can take chances and fail, a space where people can tell stories and reveal things about themselves without risk of derision or fear of being marginalized or excluded. Without safety, there is nothing. There is no learning. So as we think about cultural competency, and that captures, this quote truly captures the heart or the core of what that really means, where you can bring your best self, your most authentic self, to a place where it's safe, you can be stretched, but you can be who you are. Because without that, you're simply just putting on a new suit for the day and having to function at such a level where then the learning can begin to dissipate because you're trying to function on that sense of belonging. And so that was key in what he said, that without safety, there is nothing, there is no learning. So take a moment in your reflection guide, you'll see that here. And hopefully you were taking some notes as he was sharing in that video, but then responding to what it means to create that emotional space of safety. We'll come back after a moment or two to give you time. There is a 3-minute timer at the bottom of your screen. So start that timer and think through that with your thinking partner group or on your own, and record your thoughts in the reflection guide. This will be a good time now to pause the video, and then we'll come back together. So welcome back, everyone. You had the opportunity to reflect and connect in that area of identity. Now let's take that a step farther as we talk about culturally proficient spaces. These are environments. Again, we're not saying just a classroom, but environments where all students, educators, families, those whom we serve, the community, feel supported and are extended a sense of belonging. That sense of belonging comes back to, again, recognizing identity, being reflective in our mirrors and looking through those sliding glass doors and opening the door to opportunity and access to support anyone, regardless of race, ethnicity, gender, orientation, identity, their learning styles, preferences, socioeconomic status, or education. Really creating a space where people can be themselves. So you know that we've been engaged with the book study, and we read the final chapter, chapter 9, about really creating the ethos, or how we feel in a space, and that social cultural third space, that is something that has to be developed. And that is when our neuroceptive mechanisms, that neuroplasticity we talked about in previous session, about how our brain really functions to create memories and relationships through those synapses that confirm that our surroundings are physically, socially, and intellectually safe, then we can go into that relaxed state of alertness to become primed and ready for learning. And we do that with students and adults through the establishment of routines and rituals, and creating a sense of agency and voice through social talk structures and academic talk structures. So our routines are a way to really make space for important and affirming and those communal activities that create those social bonds among students and adults. And then rituals tap into those sensory responses, that sound, the smell of that feeling of ceremony within that classroom or space in which you are, to reinforce the elements of academic mindsets of really, I belong here. I have a place here. I can do it. You may have heard that through that growth mindset, and really challenging that deficit mindset that we've talked about previously in some sessions, and then creating agency and voice that allows us and our students, the adults in which we work with, to process, to connect, to expand our thinking through those social talk structures that allow more participatory time where we can be interactive. And that also includes motion and movement. You'll see that in our next activity. And then academic talk structures, where we're focused on really giving the language to talk academically about our learning and our thinking and our doing as well. And so it's very important as we set up those structures and systems, processes, that we come back to that place where we establish routines, rituals, agency, and voice for both our students and the adults of whom we serve. So this is an opportunity now to think about community building. And we have the opportunity here to engage in activity number 2, community building circles. Now, if you're watching this on your own, you may want to just check in with one of the 3 activities I'll show you in just a moment. However, if you're with a partner or a small group watching this video, it'll be great for you to get in a circle, sit down with your team or those that are watching this video, and really think about how a circle represents a safe space to share feelings or thoughts, emotions, and really a place of a judgment-free, kind of like Planet Fitness, a judgment-free zone, if you will, and then elimination of that hierarchy, and ensures equity so that participants can feel open and safe to be vulnerable and authentic. So as we look at the community building circles, you're going to have the opportunity to look at either topic A, B, or C, whichever one really speaks to you or resonates with you, and then engage in 1 or 2 of the questions that's been provided here in the check-in phase and the activity as well. So you'll have the opportunity to do that on your own as another time to reflect and to connect. This will be a good time now to pause the video so that you can engage in whichever community building circle opportunity of your choice right now. So welcome back, everyone. I hope you had the opportunity to engage in one of those active circles there. And as we begin to finalize our work together, we are wrapping up phase 2. The next video that you see will be phase 3, learning session number 1, in regards to culturally responsive leadership, which will be the catapult into the 22-23 school year, as we think of that licensure and evaluation piece. So the next steps prior to our next section, I want you to complete your self-paced work that is linked in the presentation. And remember, all of your post-work exercises from phases 1 through 3. Phase 3 will be delivered in mid-May. And then by close of business on May 20th, you'll be able to finish out all of your phases. So you want to make sure you completed all of your post-work exercises. And you can check the status of your points at the purple link that's been provided there. You see everyone's name in the department, and of course, you'll be able to scroll over to see those points. You're going to be looking for each of the phases to be complete. You'll see the most of the points awarded there. And so we're finishing up phase 2, cultural competency. So you should see notes there. And then, of course, when you participated in the curriculum audit, which was phase 3, or a part of that work, ahead of time for our curriculum audit, you're going to see those points there as well. And then we have the total points. We want to get all of that in so that you will meet that cultural competency mandate as a part of the Code of Virginia that we've spoken about earlier. All the presentations, recordings, and post-work exercises are not only included there in the professional learning spreadsheet, but they're also in our Equity Google Classroom. So you can select the link here, and at any time you can go right into the classwork, find CIA team. All of the learning sessions are posted along with all of the learning session recordings. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me. Happy to provide you with support and assistance. As always, I thank you for your time and your energy. Have a great day. Bye-bye.